conversation. Before we jump into the questions that we prepped ahead of time, I would love for you both to maybe share a high-level, quick snapshot of what is your role in the context of your company, because I think it might be helpful for the students to hear a little bit about what are you looking at, how or why does AI exist in your title?
Yeah. I can go first, and then I'll let you go first on the next one.
Okay.
So at LendingTree, we serve to help consumers find financial services partners, right? And so the landscape is ever shifting, and there are countless ways that you could reach out to different partners, or countless different partners you could work with to get a loan, to get a credit card, to get an insurance policy, to get a small business loan, to get a deposit account, you name it. And so our job is to help match consumers and providers together in a way that meets both of their needs. So if you think about that, it's one big optimization problem at the end of the day. How do you get the right people with the right lenders in a way that is seamless, meets the needs of the consumer in a way that's not overly cumbersome to learn what those needs are? And then how do you drive traffic to lenders to make sure, and partners and issuers, you name it, to make sure that they are getting the business that they're looking to get, right? We are a line item in their marketing budgets at the end of the day. And so when you think about AI, it serves a lot of different lenses for the organization from a strategy and data and analytics perspective as well. The only moat I think people are going to have with AI is data, right? The proprietary data, the unique data that you have, the technology itself is becoming very commoditized. And there are certain LLMs that are good at different things, but at the end of the day, what's going to make LendingTree or AWS or Amazon as a whole or other companies really have an edge with AI is going to be, candidly, their data. And so pairing AI together with analytics and data really is core to that strategy. And then on the overall corporate strategy side, we have a big focus on consumer experience. And so the expectations around consumer experience and what consumers deem a good experience is being totally rewritten with AI. And so for all of those reasons, having AI strategy and a vision for how we're deploying AI and innovating with AI really makes sense to live in a world of consumer experience and strategy and analytics at the end of the day.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I talked too long.
High level, what's your role at AWS?
Okay.
And why is AI in your title?
Okay, yeah, so high level of what I do at AWS is I lead a team of, I think we're around 24 individuals globally, former CXOs, CDOs, et cetera. And we help AWS customers, usually the most strategic ones that we have, about how to build that data foundation that you just mentioned as well, and then how to translate that into AI, right? A lot of companies now are trying to get into the space or have been thinking about the space, or they've gotten into it, but now they're not able to scale. And so my team helps them form a strategy around that. First we were just focusing on data strategy. When I first came to the team, now we're starting to embark more into the AI strategy as well. Back in, I think, 2022 when I started, it was more around being data literate, right? And that's kind of now table stakes. And so now how do we translate into AI literacy and being able to scale with that as well? And all of that comes from the data that you have. So it's really about helping these companies leverage their data to gain a competitive advantage against their competitors.
Thank you both. I always think it's important to give the room context for where you sit and what you see. I want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about future-proofing your career. So we have spent a lot of time in different contexts talking about the future of work or future-proofing your career. We're reading all these headlines about companies that are reducing force or just shifting their staffing models. And there's just a lot of implications for the so-called future of work. But the future is now. So for students and alums in the room, what does future-proof career skilling actually mean? And what do professionals often misunderstand about it when you're thinking about sort of how AI is changing the future of work?
Yeah, I think the future-proofing your career is not necessarily about the technology itself. ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera, has changed so much over the last 6 months. It's hard for me even to keep up sometimes, right? So it's more so about how do we leverage AI in our day-to-day? And how do you take the problems that you're trying to solve, being able to break it down concretely to get a specific question asked to that model, whatever it may be, and then using that to think critically about it, right? Is this, something that is true, or how can I investigate more to really validate what I'm looking for? And then the third piece will probably be understanding how to translate business context to technology context, right? Being able to sit in between the middle and make that translation, I think is be really critical in the next wave as we see as employers or employees change over time.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think the only thing I'd add to it is I think one of the things AI is doing is breaking down silos between roles, right? And you mentioned you don't need technical skills to be technical anymore, right? What you need is the ability to bridge the business knowledge and the technical knowledge to come up with a solution. And to me, what that requires really is system level thinking, understanding how part A and part B and part C of the organization work together, whether that be actual systems and platforms that you have or actual teams of what does product do, what does engineering do, what does finance do, why are they asking me the questions that they're asking me, what are they paying attention to and what are they held accountable to, and how does that impact how I interact and the solution that I need to design. And the more you can step back from the problem and the problem that you're trying to solve, as Kendra mentioned, and actually look at it in relation to where it fits into the bigger picture, the better the solution, whether that be a technical solution or not, you're going to design. And so understanding how each piece interacts with each other and the component parts, either from an org structure perspective or from a technology that's powering the company perspective, all of those things, that skill will always be translatable. No matter what happens in the tech world, no matter what happens, the ability to zoom out and see the big picture and know how this decision impacts, the first, second, third order layers out from there, I think would really set you apart.
Thank you. I want to double click on something you said about whether you are sort of in the technology piece or not, because I do think there is an application across industry and across roles when we're talking about how people are thinking, as you've described, or how people are engaging with consumer data, client data, the mechanism of whatever your organization does or provides, right? And so how might someone who is in a non-technical role engage or explore AI in a way that adds value to their work? What are a few things that you would recommend someone in the room do first if they're trying to make sense of it in a different context?
I would pick one thing first. It can get really easy to get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed often. As Kendra mentioned, the technology is constantly changing. And really, do any of us understand deeply what's powering that technology? Very few people in this world, I think, truly understand it and that whole system and how that works. And so I think if you can pick one thing to start with, because honestly, your biggest hurdle is going to be inaction and analysis paralysis at the end of the day. So pick one thing and it becomes so much more real, right? And this is advice that applies more than just to technology. If you're trying to start your own business, if you're trying to start investing, you can read all the books in the world. But until you actually get in there and try to do it and screw it up and then try again and learn from that screw up, that will teach you more than a textbook ever will. And I would say that still applies in the world of AI. So pick one thing that you hate doing. Pick one thing where you're like, there's got to be a better way. And the best solutions, whether that be technology or not, are the ones that focus on the real problem at hand. And so focus on a problem that you know intimately and see how AI can help you solve that problem. Whether that be answer a question you can answer, whether that be automate a process that you hate doing, whatever the case might be, whether that be teaching you a new topic that you wanted to learn about and AI unlocks a way for you to study and learn something new in a different way. Pick one thing and then build on it from there. And then I think the ideas will start flowing once you start with one. And I think the next one and the next thing you should learn will become more apparent once you just jump in.
Yeah, I concretely agree there. I think it's about everyone has some mundane process that they do each and every day, right? How can we use AI to automate that or make it easier for me, right? To start to focus on the other tasks. Like I say, I don't necessarily believe in removing employees because you have AI. I think it's now how do you help these employees think about higher order tasks to become even more productive now with assistance of AI, right? So thinking about how you can do that and then translate that into your day-to-day, right? It doesn't even have to be at work, right? It could be at home, right? Automating things that you're doing at home, right? Kids things. I got some agents running for the things I got going on with the kids, right? So I got a friend, exactly. Yeah. And then like I have a friend on my team who's automated essentially his overall home security system with agents, right? Anything that happens in the house, from the lights coming on to the shades going on, it's like different agents that he has that's working together to do that. And so there's many different ways that you can leverage AI. So it's thinking about like was mentioned, just start with one thing and then let that kind of evolve from there.
That's good. I'll ask you both for some of those agentic uses later because I do need them as a mom. But I do want to, so you've both alluded to this in some of your answers so far, where really the question is not necessarily about the technology tool itself, but how people are mental modeling around how they're leveraging them or using them in the flow of their work. So can you talk a little bit more about the ways of thinking that make someone effective in an AI-enabled workplace or world? Earlier, I heard problem solving, synthesizing data, making sense of data. But what other kind of skills or ways of thinking might folks in the room consider in their work that they're not considering right now?
Okay.
Go for it. Okay, I don't know who went first last time.
Yeah.
So.
I think the problem solving is one of the critical ones, right? Being able to understand the problem that you're trying to solve, because you're going to get like these vague business problems, right? And like, how do we solve for that? So being able to break it down to a concrete question that you want to ask and get a specific response back, right? And then be able to critically think about that and understand, is this factual, or how can I continue to add more value to that question to dive deeper into it? And then, thinking about how does this translate to the business and to the different things that we're doing, and really starting to now look around corners in the different your day-to-day processes, thinking about different areas of the business that hadn't been thought about before, right? Because we just didn't have the manpower, whatever it may be, right? So now you can start to do that a lot easier, right? And so being able to do that can now start to elevate you in how you're thinking about different problems and how to come at them and solve them.
That's good, Kendra. There's I want to share kind of a specific example, not in my world, but in a peer's world. I know someone who owns, they would probably call it a wedding resource business. So they plan celebrations, bachelorette parties, all these things. And so several months ago, they were talking a lot in our small group about the impact of tariffs on their business and the products that they provide and people in the United States. And she shared recently how she's used AI to help her, think about discrete problem solving, but it's also helped her preempt problems she didn't know was a problem. And the reason this came to mind is she's like, I went in and I was asking it these questions to help me fix this one thing, and it flagged something that's really niche to her business. And she was like, did you know, it was some random fact to me, but she said, did you know that 82% of helium, because they do balloons for these parties, is sourced in this one country. And as a result of that, we now need to start planning ahead for how we're going to secure helium, because it's a big part of our business, but she hadn't been thinking about it. And so I love this idea of helping you solve problems. And from a design thinking perspective, it can also help you identify problems you haven't even considered yet, right? And so if speed makes us successful at work, then maybe the use case for just tinkering with AI is helping you expand your thinking rather than replace it, which I think is what most people are usually talking about on the internet. Yeah. So thanks for that. Are there other things that you recommend your teams or maybe people outside of your discrete teams do differently as a result of AI existing in your work? Right? Like just thinking about the people who are not adjacent experts, what would you encourage them to do if they were day 2 at your company related to AI? I know I didn't give you that question ahead of time.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, I think I don't want to repeat the earlier question because the first thing I would say is find one thing to go dig in and learn about it. But I think at the end of the day, I think step back and understand the value AI is and is not providing. I think there's a lot of things it does really well, and there's a lot of, and sometimes the thing it does really well makes you less effective. Like it's great at telling you, yes, you're right, you're awesome, with the exception of maybe Grok, right? But you know, and so you need to you need to know what it's good at, and maybe what it's too good at, and where it has its own tendencies, so that you don't fall prey. Because, like I said earlier, none of us really understand intimately how these things work. I understand tokens. I understand, you know, sort of the fan out queries. I understand some of the basic concepts, but at the end of the day, like I don't really understand how these things work. And so making sure the implications of what you're getting out of AI, that you stay aware of those. I mean, you guys have probably heard the term work slop, right? It becomes really easy to be like, oh, sweet, I just automated the heck out of this thing and I don't put any human thought or critical thinking or problem solving around it. And now I've sent my team on a swirl because I said a bunch of goobly goop that didn't actually make any sense if I put any critical thought against it. And so knowing where, like starting to build out where AI is good and where AI is maybe not even bad, but too good, so that you're not falling into a trap of thinking you've got the right answer. I don't want to just go down, I don't want to just call it hallucination, because I think it's bigger than that. I think AI gives you a confidence that isn't always founded. And it's because the answers are right in front of you, true or not, hallucinated or not. But it's also working on your behalf, probably doing things that you don't actually know how to do. I don't write HTML, but Claude wrote me this beautiful visual powered by HTML to design this whole new product that we want to deliver. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what it's doing. And so it's one thing to build a visual and I can look at it and say, okay, I like that, I don't like that. But if I'm having it build an automation to write emails on my behalf, right, all of a sudden I have to get deeper into what AI is good at or too good at, and then where are my limits, and where do I need to make sure I'm checking myself on those things. So it can be a cool party trick, it can be a cool magic trick, and it is incredibly powerful. But it also, because of that, can make it incredibly dangerous. And I don't mean that to sound scary or you know, overly overblown by any stretch, but like it's capable of doing things that you're not going to realize it did wrong.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kendra, anything to add?
No, I think she said it perfectly. I think you have to have the framework in mind of like, how much do I trust it, right? Be it in your work life or in your day-to-day, how much guardrails do I want to give it, right? Do I want to connect it to my Wells Fargo account, right? Or do I not, right? So having those guardrails in mind of like how much trust I want to give it is really critical when it comes to that, right? Again, my philosophy is always having that human in the loop type experience, right? Unless it's some discrete task that is deterministic every time, right? I'm gonna get the same result every time. But other than that, you know, you probably want to be involved with the outcome and before it's going downstream, however you're making a decision from there.
Okay, so because I really want to know about these agentic uses at home, so I'm going to ask this question. But can either of you share a specific example from your work or your personal life where AI has significantly improved a process, decision, or an outcome, and what changed for the better as a result? Like, I'd love from this problem or this idea to finish story that is a warm and fuzzy one. Yeah, perfectly.
Does that have to be me specifically?
Anyone. It could be
No?
someone in your life. It doesn't have to be you.
All right. Yeah, I'll give a really good one because I know someone that's non-technical. So it's my wife, right? She has no technical background. However, she's actually built an app that is on the App Store now. It's actually an AI app. So she knows, if anyone's familiar with Robert Rules of Order, et cetera. And so she built an app of how to essentially conduct a meeting, take votes, bring up procedures that need to be voted on. And it also has an AI advisor that's built into the app that you can ask questions against with any of the votes that are brought forth, et cetera, right? She did all of that with no technical background experience, right? So she developed the app, You have to go through this long process when you're going through Apple to get it up to the App Store. It has to get validated, et cetera. And so she did all of that on her own, leveraging Claude. I think she used a little of ChatGPT as well, a bunch of different sources, and now she has an app that's fully published to the App Store from there, right? And there's not another one out there. We checked that gives that same, I guess, value when it comes to that, and so she's gotten a lot of feedback from there, and a lot of people just wanting to use the app now. So I think what this does is it really shortens that window of me not knowing any technical background, right, to now I can leverage AI, again, validating this stuff as you're going through it, but you can really start to do some really incredible things without necessarily having a coding background or whatever it may be to show value when it comes to AI itself.
That's really cool. And if you're taking notes, I think that's called vibe coding, when you're not a technical expert, but you use a few things to build something new.
Yeah.
So you should look that up later. Also, that's really cool. I'm curious to know if she's in a Greek organization or something else that uses Robert's rules often. Okay, because I was like, yeah.
That's what I made to come up with.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That is a much needed thing. That's cool. Sarah, do you have any personal or professional examples of AI at work? Excuse the pun.
Yeah. And I'm still working out the kinks on this one. It's been one where I think what's interesting, and in your example too, Kendre, like the people with the best solutions are the ones closest to the problem. But the ones closest to the problem historically haven't been the ones equipped to build the solution. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, the biggest shift with AI. I think we're going to see some really cool innovation coming out of it from people that haven't technically been empowered to do it. It's not nearly as cool as that. My son's school sends anywhere from 2 to 12 emails a week, and I inevitably miss like 5 of them, even when there's only 2. So and between myself and my husband, like, when is early release? Is that Friday? Do they also have early release on Thursday? And then there's the football schedule, and then there's my own work schedule. Oh, I'm going to be home late tonight because I'm speaking on this panel. So I'm like, okay, I clearly can't see the forest for the trees in all these emails. So will you once a week, look for any email that comes from @gastonday.org and summarize just the key points to me, and then give me a link to all the emails in case I want to read all of them individually. I don't know about you guys, but Gmail search sucks. And I can't ever I don't know how Google is so good at a search algorithm, and the Gmail search function just sucks so bad. But it does. And so I have it send me a digest, but then if an email comes out in the middle of the week that has a date in it before the next scheduled email, I want it to notify me earlier. And then I started layering. It's like, okay, once I got the email thing figured out, can I have it start scheduling things on my calendar? Because that's where I live and breathe. If it's not on my calendar, it is not happening at the end of the day. And so now I'm trying to figure out the kinks. And then I'm like, okay, can you just copy my husband already on the invite? And so he gets it too. And it doesn't all fall on me with the mental load and the juggling and what have you. So I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but I'm about 80% of the way there. And it is using functionality that actually Google's had for a long time in Gmail that I didn't even know existed. And then just building the logic, the generative content to summarize the emails that I'm getting, and the agentic ability to go schedule on my calendar. That has probably been the thing I'm most excited about, and now I feel much less like a bad parent.
That's an excellent use case. Yeah. And I may email you. Yeah. That's great. Okay, thank you both. I just love kind of seeing a little bit more behind the veil of like, how can people think about tinkering and using without it being like this big scary thing, or feel out of reach. So switching gears a little bit, if AI is raising the baseline for what good looks like at work in terms of performance, how should professionals today think about standing out? Like, what becomes your differentiator in this kind of environment?
I think, if you really think about what AI does well and what still requires the human, right? It's the human element of it. It's the building connections. It's the being willing to help your neighbor in the cube next to you figure out a problem. It's the knowing who to go to for the answer. It's the knowing how to ask good questions. To me, like, I don't want to keep harping on, critical thinking and problem solving, but at the end of the day, AI only knows the information that it has, which means it requires the information to be written down. I've never worked on a team or at a company that's great at documentation. That is like the worst part, And so we talk about data, and we talk about data governance as part of this, and the need. And the reality is, you need to take the knowledge that the human has and put it in a format that the AI can read. We're a long ways from that, and I don't know that anything we all know will ever be all in writing and consumable for AI. Maybe it will. Maybe I'm thinking too small. But the ability to ask good questions, to critically think about, like, how does this apply, to think 2 or 3 steps beyond a decision, not just the immediacy of the question that you're asking, and understand and sort of forecast out what you think the impact of this decision is going to be, and then letting that inform the next question, and the next question, and the next question. And so AI is really good within the finite confines that you give it, but it's not going to think much beyond that without you telling it to. And so what is the knowledge and the context and the skill set that we all have? It's the ability to connect those dots and the places that aren't written down. It's the ability to know that, Kendra hates small talk at the beginning of the meeting and Sarah loves it. I don't know if that's true or not, but, and the ability to build trust with another human. Like at the end, like we are communal beings, right? That is how, like, throughout history, like in anthropology and what have you, like we all thrive in community, and that's not going anywhere. And so continuing to build those relationships, to build those networks, to build those instincts that we're going to read through facial expressions and through body language and through conversation and through things that are never going to be written down about the story that, my son had this awesome goal at the soccer match last weekend, what have you, are things that we're all going to have. We're always going to have information that AI doesn't have. And so knowing what that information is and knowing what those skills are, continue to lean in and develop those.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree there. I think the other thing you can think about it as, how can you use it to essentially elevate your brand, right? Be it at your job or just externally, publicly, right? AI is good at, providing that capability as well as, building strategy, right? When you're thinking about how we're going into this meeting, what is the strategy I should use to get buy-in for this project or whatever it may be, right? Those are just some of the different ways that you can leverage AI in your day-to-day when it comes to that.
Okay, I have one more question before we open it up to the audience for Q&A. If someone wanted to become more confident exploring the AI landscape, both tinkering with it, like actioning, or learning more about it, right? I think we've talked about a few things. You mentioned AI agents, vibe coding, specific tools, that kind of thing. What are 2 or 3 smart moves they should make? Smart moves could be things that they're doing or resources that they're tapping into that you would recommend.
I would say figure out what it is in your day-to-day that you can use AI to help with, right? I can guarantee almost every decision that you're making you could probably use AI with to help validate the discussion, whatever it may be, right? I go into a lot of meetings and I use AI to help me prep for those meetings. It used to take me a day a lot of times to prep for specific customers, et cetera. And now it's 30 minutes or so, right? And it'll give me a full brief as well as generate a PowerPoint presentation for me. And so how can you use AI in those day-to-day decisions? And then starting from there and now looking at, different ways that you can start to involve it in your day-to-day tasks as well.
Yeah, and I would say use it and keep using it, and don't be daunted by what's new about it. So even in that Gmail example that I told you guys about and summarizing those emails, I probably started and then was like, nope, I don't know how to do that, like 3 or 4 times. And so I started, and I don't even know what coding language it wrote in, to be honest with you, but it said, okay, take this and paste it here and then run this part of the code. And I'm like, I write code, just not that kind of code. And I was still daunted by it. And it took me, like I said, I have chunks on Friday where I try to make myself a little bit more productive each week. I look back, what could I have automated? What could I have done better? What drives me nuts? What have you? So I'd say set aside that time for yourself and protect it, because the first thing that's going to go is something that's on fire or top of mind or what have you. And these feel like nice to haves of these, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I learned how to do this cool, fun new thing in AI? So set aside the time, and two, like don't be daunted by it, and then keep trying because it keeps changing. And what it's capable of and what it's good at, actually, sometimes it's not good at anymore. Like 4 weeks ago, I could ask ChatGPT, hey, I built a PowerPoint a couple years ago and there was something in it about something, 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 and it found it every time. I don't know what changed. It sucks now, and it doesn't do that for me anymore. So it works in both directions, but keep trying it, and don't be afraid of trying it for something you don't fully understand. But don't stop there. Go, like, now you have a concrete example. The hardest part about learning is applying your learning. And so if you have a real problem and it's telling you something to do something that you don't know how to do, you have the perfect applied learning opportunity to take what it tells you and do it on something that makes sense, and you know what you want the output to be. And so it's a lot easier to do the trial and error and to iterate through the solution when you have an intimate understanding of what you want that solution to be. So don't do what I did. Don't wait 4 weeks to actually do this thing that's actually pretty cool and has helped me a ton in staying sane at home. I can't even tell you guys what language it told me to use, but I got it to work. And that's what I needed. So keep trying, keep playing with it, with things that are real for you, and then block some time out and do it consistently, because it is constantly changing. That's not going to stop. And so just embrace it and ride the wave, and don't let the overwhelm stop you from trying.
Yeah, and I think, just to add, I think it's more so, don't just use it for a chat, back and forth, right? You can do so much more outside of that. You're really just using this limited capabilities that it has, right? And so really thinking about, even if you're not sure where to start, ask, where should I start, right? And it'll give you recommendations of where to start as well, right? So just thinking about it like that, like, what else could I be doing with this technology?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That's cool. There's so many, I think we talked about this. There's just so much information and a couple of resources that I found useful just to start wrapping my mind around what is it? What are the sort of different segments of this conversation? There's a person, I follow him on Instagram, but he has a weekly newsletter. His name is Cliff Worley. I think his handle is Fiscal Cliff. And his newsletter is Cliff Notes, but he sends out information weekly about AI. And there are hundreds of thousands of tools, and thousands are released every week. And so just trying to understand, like, what exists, how are people using it? And then there's a ton of free resources on platforms like Afrotech or Blavity, where if you want to upskill quickly in an hour, what is Claude? How are people using it? Just to dig in, if it's not in your day-to-day work, I would recommend.
Anthropic has a lot of training out there too.
Yeah.
That's free to use, videos to watch, articles to read. So pick the format that works for you. Podcasts are great too. And so pick your lane. Like, there's so many ways you could stay up to date on AI. Like, what is it doing to the environment? What is it doing to the geopolitical landscape? What is it doing to technology? What is it doing to automation? What is it doing to sales versus engineering versus whatever? So again, like, pick one and start with one. And when you feel like you've kind of satiated that one, then pick the next one. And that doesn't mean you have to take it all the way to the end. I'm the queen of not finishing a book when I realize it's not giving me the value I thought it would. So don't feel like you have to, take it all the way to the end, but stick with something long enough, because it's going to be really easy to get distracted by the next thing. But yeah, find a tool, find a newsletter that you like. There's a lot of people trying, this is going to sound bad, trying to be relevant in the world of AI, but that just means there's a ton of resources out there. And so find one that works for you and just stick with it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we are now at the time where those of you that have questions in the audience, now's your chance. Yes.
My name is Luke Plot. I'm a student out with grammatics. Yeah, and I have a question to ask, for like maybe a couple of different folds. Is there a specific LLM that you recommend, or when you actually try to get familiar with it, is like you try to find out this one specifically for certain tasks? Do you recommend that you jump from an LLM to another, trying to, depending on that steer? And there's an interesting perspective that, like you mentioned, the history that you have with what one of these can give you. And I've had situations where I try to ask the same questions to try to do the same thing with a couple of these tools, And so those are like, different folds of the questions. And then the other question is like paid versus free versions.
So I'll answer the different tools piece. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different LLMs out there. I primarily use Claude, not to say that that's the best. It's just the one I use primarily. Like I mentioned, my wife, I know she uses about 8 different ones. So I think it just depends on what you're trying to do also, because some of them are more specialized in some areas than others. But I don't think there's necessarily going to ever be one that rules them all, just because of the different ways that you can use it. Because then even with Claude, you have, different versions of Claude, right? And then you have smaller models versus larger models, right? So there's a lot of variations there. I think it's just understanding, maybe using one to help validate the other, right? LLM as a judge is kind of what it's called, right? So some companies are doing that as well, right? To help provide validation and confidence in certain results. I would say, I think it's Lenny's newsletter. He has a newsletter that you can pay for. I think it's like $300, but he gives you access to, I don't know, like 100 different tools that if you bought it yourself, it'd be like $2,000 or something like that. So there's different platforms that are doing that as well, so you can kind of get your hands on these different tools. And you don't necessarily have to pay, because you can kind of add up if you try to go to each one and try to start paying for each one, right? So that's kind of the approach that I take to it as well.
Yeah, I'll answer the easy question first. I would use free until it doesn't do what you need.
Yeah.
Like, there are some paid tools out there that you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, for a long time, there was a tool called Napkin AI that was the best at visualizations for PowerPoint, and it beat out anything else that I wanted to use. And so I used the free version until all of a sudden the free version wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So I did the free trial or a month subscription instead of a year subscription. I'm like, is this really as good as they made it out to be for me to pay for it? And so that's been my approach to whether or not I pay for something. I think Claude is great for coding, and Claude is I think, most approachable for agentic. I think, in my experience, these are all just Sarah's opinions, so take that for what it's worth. Gemini is the best at images, right, from what I've seen, and Grok has the lowest hallucination rate. And so those are kind of at least as it stands today, those are kind of my, ChatGPT, I think, tried to be too many things all at once. I think it's still great as an LLM and asking questions, but that has kind of fallen out of my favor. I also largely use Claude for most of my day-to-day because it's good enough for what I'm trying to do. But I actually pitted Claude and Gemini against each other. I'm trying to build a visualization. And depending on the style, Claude was great at the HTML. Gemini was great at like an infographic. And so that's just my experience to maybe give you some concrete examples of where I've seen them outperform each other.
Yes. I have a question. So, in 2022, I know some of the tried. Okay. So she had mentioned you that started, well, not started, but 2022, you're in the AI space. In that space, I was trying to survive the pandemic. I heard about it, but I heard the negativity about it. So I'm curious to know from both you guys, what growth have you seen since AI started? Where is that now? Where do you see it going?
I think it's just a shift in mindset around AI, right? AI is now more, I'll say, consumable, because AI itself has been around since 60s, 70s or so.
60s, 70s,
Yeah,
right.
right. So it's just now more consumable. AI has always been around us in different facets, et cetera. It's just now you're able to actually put it in your hands and actually do things with it. And so now that brings up conversations like this, right? So how do I sort of use it in my day-to-day and those type of things? I think that's probably like the biggest change. And I think how rapidly it changed, because I think someone mentioned like the metaverse was kind of going around at that same time, right? And how rapidly things shifted. And when I think it was ChatGPT that came on the scene first, and how it really caught the world by storm. And now everyone's like, okay, well, how do I latch on to this, right? And so that's kind of the biggest change that I've seen is, how does as a company, how do we get involved with it? As an individual, how do I sort to use it in our day-to-day? I think at this point, of course, it's not going away, right? It's going to become even more immersed into our day-to-day, into the different devices we have, et cetera. And so how do we start to use that as we go through our day-to-day each and every day?
Yeah. I mean, arguably, I don't know that anybody knows where it's going.
No.
I think that's borderline a fool's errand to try and figure out at this point, unless you're in the room with Sam Altman and those guys really, and I don't even know if Sam knows himself. But to me, agree with everything Kendra said. I think what has also changed is, the speed at which it's changing, right? Like there's constant improvements, there's constant iterations, and then all of a sudden there's a whole new way to apply it that is worlds different than how we had been using it before. I think its popularity has also increased, so it's hard, similar to like social media in general and the news versus what you see on social media and what is real and what is fluff. I think that's the other thing that's changed is it's gotten more attention, so it's a lot harder to parse out signal from noise. But arguably, they've gotten much more accessible, to Kendra's point, and approachable. Mm-hmm. And I think they are requiring less and less and less technical expertise. Like prompt engineer was a job family that everybody thought was going to be really critical. Now the LLMs are kind of overcoming the need as more time goes on to write a good prompt. Right, they're meeting the consumer or the end user where they are. And so where you needed good prompt engineering tools and skills, even a year ago, like that's less necessary now. And so those are different ways I've seen it change. And I don't think anybody could have predicted that when they were hiring prompt engineers, right? And so I don't know that anybody can predict confidently where it's going, other than I think it's going to continue to surprise us.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Yes. I have the TML. I'm playing a cybersecurity field here. I wanted to know, what are the biggest mistakes you see students make or professionals make when trying to break into tech or pivoting and advancing in their careers?
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. The biggest mistakes.
I will speak, maybe not intentionally to exclude part of the room, but just because I'm passionate about learning about this, is for women in particular. This is more generally career than just tech oriented, but there have been studies done that a male will apply for a role when he thinks he's 20% ready for it. A woman waits till she's 80% ready. And so I think that is a big mistake that I mentor a lot of women just because I'm passionate, because I think not because women or men are better or worse, or that I don't have a passion for mentoring men too, but there's unique challenges that I can empathize with and that I have lived experience with as a woman that are different than the lived experience as a man. And you could say that about all sorts of demographic characteristics, right? Just that's the one that I relate to. And so I think as I'm coaching women, and even a good friend of mine on the phone with her this morning, I'm not qualified for this job. I don't have the gap knowledge for this accounting job. Like I shouldn't apply. I'm like, why the heck not? Let them tell you no. Why are you screening yourself out of this job, right? Mm-hmm. And sure enough, the role was not at all what it said in the job description. She's way more qualified than she thought she was. But I think that probably, if I were to pick a biggest mistake that I see people, especially women, make, and it's not limited to women, I've seen men do it too, is thinking that you have to know too high of a threshold before you take on the next challenge. I think it's similar to an answer I gave before. Like most people learn through doing. Like nobody walks into a job, even if you're an accountant 2 at this company and you're an accountant 2 at this company, there's a bunch of stuff you're not gonna know. Nobody expects you to walk onto the job knowing how to do your job, right? They expect you to be willing to learn. They expect you to have foundations of concepts and transferable skills. So don't wait for perfection before taking on the next challenge.
Yeah, and I don't have one from a mistake standpoint, but just breaking into tech or, understanding what area of tech you want to get into, you can use AI to help you with that, right? So, you have the job or description, et cetera, and like, how do I prepare for that role, right? What are some of the things I should start to learn? I think that's something that might not have, triggered a lot of people right now when it comes to jobs that they're looking for and prepping for that. But I think that's one of the areas that breaking into those fields that you have no experience about how you can start to make those inroads into that area.
Yeah. And I would say you guys are already taking steps to do this well. One of the things we're seeing from a recruiting perspective is we're getting flooded with resumes, right? And because it's a lot easier to write a resume. It's a lot easier to have an agent apply for jobs for you. It's a lot, like the barrier is a lot lower. I think we had one role where we had 20,000 applicants. We're an 800-person company, and so relationships get you jobs. But not all the time. And that doesn't mean you didn't earn the job that you got through a relationship, but you become a known commodity when you are known. And so the more and the soft skills and the things that are really hard to gauge in an interview are a whole lot easier to gauge in a relationship. Like how true is somebody to their word? How do they handle adversity? How do they problem solve? Like you learn that through a relationship, and that's the stuff that's really hard to gauge in an interview. And so the more relationships you have, it's not just about schmoozing. And I used to think networking was a 4-letter word. I'm like, that sounds so impersonal. Like I don't want to make friends and build relationships for what they can give me. That sounds terrible. That sounds so disingenuous. But at the end of the day, who you know is as important as what you know. And it doesn't have to be self-serving, and it doesn't have to be disingenuous. It just gives you an opportunity to showcase who you are. And you don't know, you might be able to help them too in some opportunity or some idea. So I applaud all of you for coming to this on a Thursday evening, because a lot of it is about A, getting exposure to different perspectives and different experiences, and B, exposing yourself to new people and building that network.
Sarah, Kendra, thank you so much for your candor tonight and having this conversation on a Thursday night.
Thank you both.